called the Mindfulness Pebbles. And the heart practice is one of those pebbles. And we're going to connect it to a loving kindness meditation. So I'm going to ask you to get comfortable in your chair or your seat or wherever you're joining from right now. You can either close your eyes or keep them open. Bring one hand or two hands to your heart and just take a couple breaths to center yourself here. Maybe start to feel your heart beating against your hand and your breath moving through your heart space. Just breathing at a comfortable pace in and out. So first, I'm going to invite you to focus on yourself and bringing your attention inward. Either say in your mind or out loud, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, and live with ease. And feel that intention moving through your heart as you breathe. And then extend that feeling out to someone that you immediately have feelings of love for. And think maybe, did your face smile? Did you feel a sense of warmth as you called that person's presence to your mind? And then send out to them, may you be safe, be happy, be healthy, and live with ease. And then call to mind someone, an acquaintance, not too deeply connected, that you have feelings of mild care for. And notice maybe your thoughts go cognitive as you think about that person, but you have neutral feelings. And calling that person to mind, extend to them, may you be safe, be happy, be healthy, and live with ease. And now call to mind someone that you have feelings of unease for. Maybe that's frustration or anger or resentment. And try to notice if you felt something in your body because you have those feelings of unease for that person. Did anything tighten? Did your face respond to calling that person to mind? Try to release that sense of tension or that sense of physical unease. And then wish that person, may you be safe, be happy, be healthy, and live with ease. And finally, to everyone, try to bring the greater community, your school community, your state, your country, the world, and extend out to that community. May we be safe, be happy, be healthy, and live with ease. Final breath in, and you can release your hands. Oh, that's so helpful. So thank you for joining us in that quick mindfulness moment. And now that we've kind of centered in the moment and connected as a group, we can get down to the business at hand. So let's talk about some learning outcomes connected to self-regulation. Today, we're going to focus on understanding the components of self-regulation and why it's so critical to the social emotional development in early childhood and beyond. And we're going to learn how to create an intentional space in your program classroom environment, and then how to infuse that space with breathing techniques, movement, and sensory tools in order to support self-regulation in young children. And finally, at the end, we're going to reflect on our roles in supporting and co-regulating with children so that we can create a plan to implement these new practices to support ourselves and the children we care for. So let's start with an understanding of what is self-regulation and what isn't it. So one way to think about self-regulation is kind of broadly the ability to regulate behavior, cognition, and emotion in order to pursue goal-directed behaviors. So self-regulation skills include higher order cognitive functions such as problem solving, planning, and impulse control. And the ability to regulate thoughts, feelings, and actions helps children successfully negotiate many of the challenges they face, promoting resilience in the face of adversity. So what self-regulation isn't is just self-control or just self-management, just executive functioning. That self-regulation is really the umbrella term for all of these coordination of skills. And what you'll see when we get to Rachel's component today is that at the base of self-regulation is sensory regulation, that core body regulation that we need before we can then layer on emotional regulation, behavioral regulation, and then cognitive regulation. But all of that together is what we're going to cover. And there are multiple layers of factors that contribute to self-regulation, from biological disposition to caregiver support and environmental context. And while biology sets the stage for self-regulation readiness, it's the more complex skills and the motivation for self-regulation that develop through the interaction with caregivers and the broader environment. So that's, while we can't control the biological readiness or the composition of the children in our care, we can absolutely control the environment that we create around them, and then our behaviors and our interactions with the children. So I do see a hand up from one of our attendees. So I just want to pause that if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat for us. And team, if there's anybody that I might be missing because I'm not focused on, if you could help them, that would be wonderful. So how do self-regulation skills develop? And then how can we support this with our series of strategies and tools? So we're going to focus on self first as the most important key part of supporting self-regulation in others. So it's going to start with you. And then it's going to build with warm relationships, a structured, calm environment, responding with warmth during periods of stress, working with parents, and then working with your greater community. And there's this trifecta you can see over on the right, that when we build warm, responsive relationships within a structured environment and we intentionally support self-regulation skills, that's how we can come together in this combined approach to support self-regulation in children. And I do just want to note those graphics in the earlier slide and this slide come from some wonderful resources that are hyperlinked on this slide, but also at the end of the presentation. So anytime you're looking for more information where this was just a snapshot, we will have more for you at the end. So I mentioned that we're going to focus on a place-based approach to supporting self-regulation skills. What we mean by that is we are going to we're going to share the recipe, including all of the ingredients and the how-to, of how to create a place in the environment to serve as an anchor space. We're going to call that a cozy corner for the purposes of today's learning experience. But then we're going to talk about how to use this space as the anchor to practice the skills, learn the strategies, and then from this place, they can be extended and generalized out into the day. So the quote that you see, form and function are one, it comes from an architectural perspective from Frank Lloyd Wright, and he actually developed it from Sullivan, his mentor, which started with form follows function. But it's really closely connected to the cozy corner because we need to think about spaces in our environment as having this interconnected relationship where the furniture or the place to sit should enhance and serve the purpose. So like my chair with armrests serves the purpose of an office chair, but in our cozy corner, it should serve the purpose of comfort, calm, and supporting regulation. So that's what we'll go over throughout the rest of this experience, is how the really intentional design of the things you put in the space and how you use them support children in these all-important self-regulation skills. So I'm going to start with this slide and with a question for the audience. If you can share, are any of these being used in your program? Meaning, do you have a safe place? Do you have a calm down area? Do you have a cozy area, a Zen den, a peace center? And awesome, could you name what it is that you call it in your program? And then maybe what you have there. So if you call it a calm down area and you have a pillow and some books, if you could just let us know that. But we're really curious about what you currently have in your programs, what you call it, and then we'll get into how you use it in a minute. So Heidi has a cozy corner, safe place, lots of conscious discipline items, a calming corner. I'm trying to see if there's any that I haven't heard of. Guys, call any out if you see some.
Cozy cube.
Quiet.
Yep.
Yeah, cozy cube, quiet corner. Yeah, so please keep entering those in, but I'm just going to kind of go over the examples that we see here. Top left is Becker's Cozy Corner solution. Top right is Conscious Discipline Safe Place. Bottom left is in a program that utilizes the second step social emotional program and the pyramid model. So that's a self-created kind of cozy area within an open space for movement next to it. And then finally, bottom right, we have might be a privacy cube. And in this situation, it was used in coordination with conscious discipline. So it was a safe place, but with a cozy cube. So in all of these examples, there are some key ingredients. So first and foremost, it needs to be easily and freely accessible throughout the day to the children. There needs to be ample room with comfortable seating. It needs to include sensory tools to either enhance or reduce that sensory input. Visual guides to support three key areas: breathing, identifying feelings, and problem solving. And then finally, it can be enhanced by a nearby space for big body movement. It can be used as a precursor or as a part of the strategies in that cozy corner.
Right. Erin just did a fabulous job introducing us to some of the scientific foundations for regulation. And we're going to go a little deeper and talk through the progression to self-regulation from co-regulation and external regulation. So we know that very, very young children are reliant upon the grown-ups in their life to help all their physical and emotional needs. They can give us cues, but they can't feed themselves. They can't keep themselves warm enough. They can't cool themselves down if they need to take off a layer. So as adults, we're pretty comfortable with the concept that infants need external regulation. Then children kind of move into this co-regulation place. And honestly, this is where we're anchored during our early childhood years. As children grow, they're going to start dipping their toe into the self-regulation and building those muscles. But we're really going to be hanging out in this co-regulation place because we're needing to give many, many opportunities for safe, secure interactions where children know that their grown-ups can handle the fullness of their experiences, so that they can build those skills to do it independently. That really looks like adults primarily being present, being with children, not escalating along with children. And children feel safe when they trust that their adults can do that. So eventually, the self-regulation builds into a lot of the aspects that Erin spoke about: impulse control, flexibility, executive functioning, and all of that is the foundation for all of our learning objectives: emotional, social, cognitive. We need to have that starting point. So not just children need help with self-regulation. And self-regulation isn't a point at which you level up and you never need to kind of flow back into that co-regulation place. Um, we know that adults often need help finding their center. Our invitation in the beginning of our webinar, when we were kind of doing our welcome and asking you to check in with yourself and see if you could identify a sensation in your body when you're sharing space with a child that's having a difficult time. Noticing that and identifying that can be one of the most powerful things to then creating some strategies to support yourselves in those moments. As educators, that can be one of the most powerful things we can do, is kind of knowing our triggers or knowing the things that we really struggle with, and then knowing what resources we can have on hand to support ourselves in that moment. So I heard a lot of words about tension. I heard things about shoulders being high or faces feeling tense, feeling warm or hot. I know sometimes I can kind of feel my heart start racing. And that's a real thing. That's our parasympathetic nervous system telling us like, oh, I don't know if I'm safe. So thinking about how we can bring ourselves back to center so that we can be that place of calm for children is super important. There are lots of mentions of breathing techniques as strategies. So I love that that's what we're going right into. It's one of the most common strategies we use with young children, and they're wonderful. It's always accessible. We do have tools and resources we can use with it, but we can also do our breathing activities wherever we are, whenever we are. There is a ton of new science that is emerging. Actually, I think it was the most recent one was just in November of 2024, and scientists identifying new specific neural pathways between your breath and intentionally focusing on your breath and the reduction of stress and positive emotions. So if you're as interested in geeking out about that as we are, there's a link on this slide. When you download the slides, you can link to that for a deeper dive. Really fascinating stuff. So here is an overview of a couple different ways and visual guides for supporting breathing techniques in the classroom. On the top left is our Becker's I Breathe poster. And there are two resources from the pyramid model. One is Tucker the Turtle and his prompts for taking 3 deep breaths for calming down. We'll talk about the pinwheel and flower in just 1 second. And then Conscious Discipline offers a couple different breathing exercises. On this poster, there's a drain and pretzel and star and balloon. So the smell the flower and blow out the pinwheel feels like that's just like 1 breath. Why is this important? There are lots of other techniques, but if you have ever tried to either help a very young child blow their nose or try to do some of these breathing exercises with children, you'll realize that they are still really internalizing the concept of an inhale or an exhale, or a breathe in or breathe out or blow out. So offering the prompt of smelling a flower or smelling something really helps them access that sense of breathing in, and then inviting them to blow the pinwheel or blow a bubble or blow out the candle. That activates that kind of immediate sense of releasing that breath and blowing it out. So that prompt can be really powerful if you're working with children that are still getting a sense of what that language really means. So let's go ahead and practice. We can call it 5-finger breathing. We can call it hand breathing. I've heard kids call it starfish breathing or roller coaster breathing. This is a favorite because we always have our hand with us, and we're going to trace up each finger. And at the top, we can hold our breath for 1 second, and then we'll exhale. So we're going to do that for all 5 fingers. So we'll breathe in and out. Out. In. Out. In. And out. In. And out. It's also great because by the time you take 5 breaths, a lot of us have had a chance to come back to center.
So a natural segue from breathing might be identifying our emotions and our feelings. We heard a lot of it's in response to feeling a certain emotion that we might need to take a deep breath. Sometimes we need to take a deep breath in order to figure out exactly what emotion we're feeling. But identifying emotions is the first critical step in order to being able to manage them. So using tools like feelings charts, emotion books, and puppets all help us to identify feelings. So this quote from Brene Brown from Atlas of the Heart, language shows us that naming an experience gives us the power of understanding and meaning is so critical. And it's critical that we're teaching this ever increasing dictionary, vocabulary of emotions, vocabulary as children grow, that they and we can begin to identify our specific emotions with granularity, as opposed to staying within those high umbrella emotions. One great way to do this in the classroom before you're even in your cozy corner is by frequently modeling how you're feeling throughout the day. So it could be when you're in morning meeting or afternoon meeting and saying, what are you going to do this weekend? And you're having that conversation with the kids, and the kids say, oh, Miss Erin, what are you doing? And you're saying, oh, I'm just hanging out at home. I'm actually feeling kind of sad and disappointed that my kids couldn't come home for the weekend from college because of the bad weather. So, I think I'm going to take advantage of the time and maybe read a book. But that way, it's just you're contextualizing and you're inserting feelings language into conversations that happen throughout the day. And then, in reference to the specific cozy corner, that specific place, we can do direct feelings and emotions instruction. So the example of the tools that you'll see here, we highlight frequently the same resources because we want to support you in creating the cozy corner in your place, utilizing the tools that are most helpful for you. So I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but each one of these boxes on each of the slides is hyperlinked directly to that organization's resource. So you'll see there's the Becker's I Feel poster, and I'll talk about more of that in a minute. But then there's the Head Start Center for Inclusion and their emotions and feelings faces, which are more realistic illustrations. Then Conscious Disciplines, Basic 8, which are more emoji style emotions. And then the NCPMI, the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, that's Pyramid Model Group. They have feelings and emotions charts in a lot of different forms. So they have a feelings wheel, they have this Today I Feel chart, but most of them include photographs as a way to connect to real children. But the key to having these emotional vocabulary tools in your cozy corner is to provide clear visuals and physical tools when possible, and then to start with the basics and then add terms based on the children's observed emotions. So if we're seeing a lot of children feel disappointed that they didn't get to have a turn with a highly desirable new toy or new material that was brought into the classroom, that might be an opportunity to bring in and introduce the term disappointed as opposed to sad or angry. But really taking the cues from the children and what they are experiencing, and then introducing it to direct instruction. So just to highlight a note about the I Feel chart from the Becker's Cozy Corner solution, it has 10 pockets where the cards are double-sided, but there's 23 different emotions cards. And on the one side, there's the hand-drawn illustration, and on the other side is the photograph. So that way, whatever connects to the child more, they're able to use. And then the teacher is in control of how many and when they introduce new feelings and emotions. And it includes the mirror in the middle, so that without having to have another piece of equipment, a child can connect their facial expressions and physical affect to a feeling or emotion they may be having. So again, the key to this one you'll still see frequently is to practice. One way to practice is to have a daily feelings check-in. This is a video. I'm not going to play it today, but it's just this classroom putting their named clip on their emotion, on their feeling when they come in the door every day. This same group of children, I'm only going to play one of them, but in this one here, this child is frustrated at his loose parts falling away from what he was trying to create. And this child was super excited at being able to start to learn how to trace his name. So those are examples of a teacher using feelings vocabulary within the context of play to reinforce the feelings that are taught within the cozy corner. And then in this example for embarrassed and scared, we're going to watch this child as she investigates the physical affect of a beloved character in the book. So she's going to notice that Grover has his hand and his face in a certain position, and she's going to ask, what does that mean? And then she's going to connect to a different emotion and feeling that she sees in Grover that she does know. Oops.
It's the end, Isabella. You're telling me to look at Grover. What does he look like?
Funny.
He looks funny.
Look, he has his head.
He's rubbing his head.
No, he's his head.
He's touching his head.
He's doing that.
Because he said the words right here, Isabella, say, "Oh, I am so embarrassed."
What?
Do you know why he's embarrassed?
Why?
Because the whole time he was afraid of a monster
What?
at the end of the book. See his face? How does his face look?
Wait.
Afraid. He looked scared. He thought there was a monster at the end of the book. But who was at the end of the book? Who was it?
No.
It was just Grover. There was no scary monster at the end. It was just Grover. So he said, "I'm so embarrassed. It was just me. There was no scary monster, just Grover."
So I encourage you to go back and watch the other videos, but that's the key here is that it's in coordination. So in the context of the child's play and throughout their day, the educator is modeling his or her own feelings identification and describing when they witness those feelings in the children in their care, and then also intentionally connecting it back to the tools in that cozy corner. So using the mirror, describing what the child is doing. Your fists are clenched and your eyebrows are pushed together and your teeth are gritted. You look angry. And it's using that ability to connect with children in order to help them, number one, identify their emotions, and then hopefully introduce problem solving so that they can figure out if their emotion is connected to something they might need to change in their state.
So different problems require different solutions. So we were just talking about feelings, and that really ties into that emotions piece. So obviously, when we have emotional concerns come up, and we want to problem solve with that, we need specifics. So is it that we're missing our family, and we want to look at a photo book or draw a picture because we're really excited that Grandma and Grandpa are going to be coming to our house this weekend? So we really want to recognize the needs for solution cards related to emotions, those social conflict resolution pieces that we talk about, which we consider we problems. They're things that have multiple people involved, and we want to be able to focus on that with our solution cards as well. And then we want to look at sensory needs. That's often what's kind of left out of this problem solving processes. We want to look at the sensory needs and how we can accept those and meet those needs of everyone in our classroom. Within the sensory needs, we also want to look at the interoceptive needs. Children often have difficulty understanding what their internal needs are. Interoceptive is just that need for being hungry, thirsty, tired, hot, cold. A lot of times that's really the overarching problem that's occurring, but children have a difficult time recognizing that. So being able to have that visual that our students can use throughout the day, that we're exposing them to repeatedly, really helps them build that toolkit in co-regulation with us. So as they get older, they're able to do so within self-regulation as well. So when we're thinking about those me problems, we're thinking about sensory needs. These are needs that are within ourselves that we want to get met. So when we're thinking about sensory needs, we really want to look at the total picture. Is it that we need to have specific tools in our cozy corner area that our children have access to? Are we accepting of everyone in our classroom and what their sensory needs are? We all know what our basic needs are, and it's very appropriate for anybody to ask for a drink of water or to be able to go get their coat when they're cold. But are we also normalizing other sensory needs, such as it's really loud in the classroom for one person and they have extra sensitive ears. So maybe they need to get that set of headphones to meet their sensory needs. So our Becker's Cozy Corner has the solution cards that address all of these, but also Head Start, Conscious Discipline, and NCPMI have those options as well. And like Erin mentioned, there's links to those resources here. So one of the things I like to remind everyone is that constant exposure to the different sensory tools to use in a calm, familiar environment. And my own mistake I like to reference is that there was a situation where I had a student, it was the third week of school, I was a special educator, and this student was very sensitive to noise. And we were having a pep rally at our school that was going to involve the drum line from our local high school coming. So we knew that was going to occur. And so I went to the Cozy Corner that day and grabbed those noise canceling headphones and just brought them with us to the gym for the pep rally. So we introduced those to that child in the gym in the pep rally right before the drum started. That child was very apprehensive about putting those on his ears. He refused to, and then we actually had to leave the pep rally because he became overwhelmed with the loud noises. So in hindsight, what I should have done would be to introduce these in a calm environment in my classroom where he's familiar with things repeatedly before getting to the point where he was overwhelmed in a different situation. So really figuring out what works for each individual child and introducing it repeatedly is key. So when we're thinking about individual sensory needs, we think about those basic 5 senses that we teach our students: touch, sight, sound, taste, and smell. But we have additional senses as well. We actually have 8 altogether. And we talked about that interoceptive need, those basic needs for hunger, thirst, sleep that everyone has. But we also have vestibular and proprioceptive needs. That's that need for what we call heavy work, exertion, movement. Often our students that have the most behavioral concerns are the ones that have a larger bucket that needs to be filled sensory-wise with that movement and heavy work. So how can we incorporate that into our classroom? Also, those are often our students that are just a bit busier and have a more difficult time focusing. A lot of times those are children that later on are diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, or some type of other neurodiverse diagnosis. So how can we fill their sensory bucket while also meeting those academic needs that we really want to prepare them for kindergarten? So example of this would be being able to provide a, instead of a paper pencil activity, maybe with name writing, we change it up a little bit, and we know that child really has the sensory need for tactile or touch and getting ooey gooey. So maybe we're going to do it with shaving cream today. And that child who participated for 0 minutes is now able to participate for 2 or 3. So how can we incorporate those different things for our students? Same goes for students that aren't sensory seeking, but are sensory avoiding. Maybe we're going to do finger paint that day and we need to provide some accommodations like a close sink or a baby wipe, or maybe even putting it inside a plastic bag so that child knows they don't have to touch it. We want everybody to feel safe and comfortable within the environment to be able to access things on their own level based on their sensory needs. So going a little deeper into that vestibular and proprioceptive, that need for movement, we want to talk about replacement behaviors. Replacement behaviors can work for these 2 areas of sensory need, but they can work with any other area of concern as well. So if you've got any type of behavioral concern, what we really want to do is, instead of prefacing it in our brain as this is a problem behavior this child is participating in, we want to step back, take a deep breath like we talked about before, and think about what sensory need is being met when that child does that behavior. For example, this child here is climbing. So you've had climbers on top of shelving, maybe on top of a table, and they try and stand up and it's dangerous. So instead of automatically thinking about how do we completely extinguish that behavior, how can we replace it with something that is more acceptable and safe? So for this vestibular proprioceptive piece, what we can do is think about replacement big body movements. So is it that when they're climbing, we can do a bear crawl on the floor instead that is safe because they really need that input of moving their hands and their legs in synchronicity? Is it that they actually are really excited when they get up on top of that table and you think they're going to fall? They're needing that feeling. So is it that we can use something from our cozy corner like the bouncy board here in order to balance and feel a little bit like it's a little scary and a little risk taking? But we can also modify that a bit. Is it that that student needs a little extra and that bouncy board that we have is actually we're going to have them jump on and off of it repeatedly if they need to amp it up a little bit? Is it that that child, like this little guy in the picture, was recently a crawler and he's not interested in doing the bear crawl on the floor? He just learned how to walk, but he can also climb. Maybe we need to challenge him a little bit more and try something like your middle school PE crab walk or something similar. Is it that you need to modify it a little bit for yourself because you're not able to get down on the floor and show them how to do that bear crawl? So let's do it in the air instead. So we can modify all of these. Another thing to look at is if you have a child that's going to run around your classroom or maybe running in the hallway or running away from you. A lot of times they're doing that to get that sensory input of exertion. They want their heart rate to be up. They want to be sweaty. They need that physical activity. If you can take any opportunity you have to be outside with that child in any way possible, that's a recommendation. But if we're not able to, are there things we can do inside our classroom? Can we have that movement area that is safe for children to go to where they can get that physical exertion? Is it that they're going to do jumping jacks, which a lot of times looks more like starfish, and that's fine? Is it that we're stomping the ground or we're squatting and squeezing? Different things that require that physical exertion and getting that heart rate up is going to help with those children that need that running. Another piece is if you have a child that is pushing, what sensory need is getting met by that? Is it that they need that heavy work and they need to push up against a wall or do the cobra extension on the floor? Or is it that they're communicating when they are pushing someone away that they need space? And instead, we need to go back to those social conflict cards and reference that we can instead say, please stop. So those are some different replacement behaviors we can do for our students. So with big body movements, we just talked about that with the vestibular and proprioceptive piece in the slide before this, but we really want to have a designated space that our students can go to that is safe for them to perform these big body movements. There's lots of different options from Conscious Discipline, Head Start, and we also have our Becker's I Move poster here. With the Becker's I Move poster, one of the things that we want to note is that it is adjacent to the Cozy Corner. It can stand alone and just be used for a movement break that that child needs. Or if a child has escalated and needs to work through the problem-solving process, then they can do so with that I Move poster. So with the I Move poster, we're talking about co-regulation where you're going to assist them in learning the different movements. Maybe we're learning it as a group on the large group rug. Maybe we all need a movement break together. But eventually our goal is that these students are able to recognize maybe they're on the large group rug and they're getting really wiggly and they're kicking and maybe they're not so safe. And instead of moving them to another chair to sit quietly, where they're probably going to move again or crawl under a table, what we can do instead is say, I recognize that you really have a need to move right now. Would you like to go to the I Move space? And then they can eventually, after they've co-regulated with you and learned together, be able to start doing that on their own as well. So the next piece we're looking at is the we problems, right? That social conflict resolution. So how can we look at that? There's lots of different ways. Again, all the different options and resources you can look at here, but we're really thinking about how we can solve these social problems and providing those visuals and practicing. Is it that we're practicing together as a class with things that are of low interest? Maybe we're going to practice turn taking or setting a timer with a pom-pom that nobody really cares about keeping, but we can practice together as a class and do that. So when it comes time that we really need to solve a social conflict together, we're able to start putting that into practice. So on this page, you can see our social problem-solving conflict cards here are actually at each center. So we have those solution cards related to social conflicts at each center because those are typically the places during center time that we're having the social conflicts, right? So having these available at each center so students can reference them And then in the next picture, what you'll see is this little girl is actually reviewing the social cards or the solution cards with her teacher. So that's an activity all in its own where that child is learning. And actually she's on a picture right here. This is actually a video that we did a still life of, and she's actually verbally noting what the conflict is and coming up with the scenario all on her own. So the goal is to actually be able to do eventually what this child in the next video is doing, where they're able to come up with the solution without accessing the card resource. Oh, is it not playing?
Goes out, then it's Jose's turn with the airplane. That was a good suggestion. Bella, are you the one who thought of the timer?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of our solution cards.
So that teacher is purposefully describing what she's seeing the child do, praising them for it in a very basic way. We're not saying good job. We're saying, I'm seeing that you use our solution cards for that. And so she's referencing back to that for that student. And then everyone else that's working around her is also recognizing that she accessed those solutions from the solution cards.
So our final tool within the Cozy Corner that we're going to talk about that brings together all of these different strategies is a problem-solving plan. That's our term for it. So you'll see that's our poster in the top left, but similar names are used by other programs, right? It's the problem-solving steps, and they encompass generally a sequence of activities that a child can move through. Very often they involve behavioral regulation and cognitive. Some start with emotional, but not all of them start with that sensory regulation at the base and identifying what's happening within the body. So there's an opportunity within our problem-solving visual resources to provide something that includes the full array of options. So when we created the problem-solving plan poster in our Cozy Corner, it was important to us to center the child in the middle of all of the solutions and with an adult, so that can be a co-regulated relationship. And then to include, instead of a sequence order of steps, a menu, a wheel of options that children can start to explore independently to figure out what is the right solution to the current situation. Is it going to be a series of steps? Or do I know that by coming over here, I need to go straight to I move. I need to move my body. So this visual supports the educator in identifying what the child might need, but also supports that independent problem solving. But remember, the independent problem solving only comes after the joint and the co. So if I didn't mention it before, that's the NCPMI problem solving steps, Tucker the turtle, and then Al's Pals problem solving steps that might look familiar to you as well. So at the beginning, we talked about the ingredients for the Cozy Corner, but if we're going to really create this and share the recipe, we have to talk about how to do that. So quantity, frequency, how are we going to put all these things together? So step one is to identify the place in the classroom, the place wherever you are in your program, where you are going to fill it with the right tools for the right purpose. Remember that form and function are one. So if it's meant to support comfort and physical regulation, it needs to be comfortable to both the child and the adult who will co-regulate in that space. And then fill that space with the appropriate tools. So those tools will be something to support emotional regulation and feelings identification, to support the acquisition of breathing techniques, to support movement, proprioceptive and vestibular input exercises. And then finally, the stuff. So like, what stuff do you need to have? If I need to have a photo album of our different families in this basket in order to support children who are feeling sad because they're missing a family member, then that goes in that space. If I need something soft and cozy because it just makes me feel good, maybe that I am because I'm missing somebody, or just because I'm cold and I need something soft, that's also in the basket. So it's not just about having the tools and in any order, but it's this really synchronized use of the tools in the space. And the secret ingredients, the special sauce, or not so secret because we're sharing it, is that the space alone means nothing without the daily practice. Some of you might recognize that, yeah, we've had a cozy corner. We've had a this, we've had a that. The children walk right by. I walk right by. They use it as a jumping zone. They use like all of the misuses from what it was actually intended. So the secret ingredient is the daily practice for its intended purpose. So the tip here is whatever your role is with children, whether you're an observer, a coach, a classroom educator, if you have a regular role where you interact with children, choose one child every day to intentionally bring over to the cozy corner to simply be present with. Try not to have a goal-directed activity of, I'm going to teach you this, or I'm going to have you identify these 3 feelings on your faces, or I'm going to help you in choosing the solution. Try just to go be with that child, be fully present, and then acknowledge what it is that you're seeing. So maybe you invited them over and you notice them, like you're looking at kind of like wiggly and fidgety, and I'm noticing you like move your pants buckle here. It kind of looks like maybe you're uncomfortable right now. And then you could have them look in the mirror like, this is when I'm uncomfortable. It kind of looks like this. So we look in the mirror, we look at each other's faces. Maybe the child agrees with that or doesn't agree with that. But you have an interaction based on how that child is existing in the moment. And then you're looking at the tools around you and looking for opportunities to either explore a sensory solution that you've never tried, to just experience the things in the basket together, or to have a conversation. But choose one child every day, visit the cozy corner. Doesn't need to be more than 2 or 3 minutes together. And then you will see that by repeated use of practicing being present in the moment and truly connecting with that child, you will find the ultimate goal is that the child seeks out the cozy corner independently. And that's what we want. We want children to see this space as, oh, this is a coveted space where I know I can go find what my body needs right now. And that is, again, a whole range of solutions. But until you go to that space with the child and help them transfer your good mojo, that's what you're doing. You're doing that energy, that emotional transference. You're saying when you come here, you feel supported, you feel comfortable, you feel like you can find what your body needs. And after that repeated exposure, they will independently seek out that space, and then they will be able to self-regulate. So to show us kind of how all that magic comes together, Christine is going to take a sneak peek into the Cozy Corner solution.
My goodness. We are so excited. This is the result of 2 years of product development. And we're so grateful we had the participation and a lot of really important input from our advisory council. And we could talk about the thinking behind this all day. So I made you a video. It's linked here, and you can watch that yourself and please share it out. But I did want to take just a minute to do an overview of what's included. A lot of it will look familiar. We've been touching upon a lot of the components throughout our session. There we go. Thanks. So we have both options for a cozy corner for toddlers and a cozy corner specifically for preschool and primary age children. And there's a lot that's the same about both age groups, and there are just a couple things that are different. So we were going to do an overview and then kind of tease out the differences. There is this really comfortable cushion that's included, and you're probably going to notice that speaks to the whole co-regulation piece. It is big enough for a teacher and a child so they can both be in that space together, sharing these experiences and building that well of co-regulation experiences. Both age sets have a curated collection of materials and tools. They're very specific for all of the sensory input components, as well as emotional needs. Erin talked about a photo album. There are books about identifying emotions, and they're a little different for each age group. Some practical things like the sizes of the noise reducing headphones, that's going to be specific to the toddler and the preschool and the primary. The bouncy balance board is only included with the preschool and primary, and both toddler and preschool and primary include this visual toolkit and training collection. And this is what you have seen embedded in our grid throughout our time together today. And it includes all of these really thoughtful visuals. And the part we haven't had a chance to talk about yet is that each of these posters have a QR code. And when you scan that QR code, you're taken to a short, concise, but super clear training video for teachers about how to introduce and use these materials in your classroom. So while the graphics and the images for both posters for toddlers and preschool and primary are the same, we wanted children to learn these and be exposed to them as toddlers and not have to relearn them when they encounter them again. But the QR codes are specific to the age group that you're working with. So our lovely Erin developed these videos, and they have examples of real kids, real teachers moving through the steps of each of these resources. And you can revisit it as often as you want. You can come in one morning and be like, oh, I'm not sure I did that right yesterday. Let me scan it again and watch it and be ready to go back right back to it. All right, you might be thinking, I already have a cozy corner. I already have a privacy cube. We use OwlsPals, we use conscious discipline. The great news is that all of these components integrate so well with any existing space and curricula. We do appreciate that sometimes literal space, just the footprint of your classroom, can be a challenge. So if you're like, this is amazing, I don't know that I can fit a cushion in addition to our other space, we have made just the visual toolkit and training collection available, so you can have access to these really great visual resources and the training videos as well. And some resources about all of these components available for you today. We have a do-it-yourself activity for making your own breathing cards featuring the hand breathing that we practiced earlier together. On that link, there's also a downloadable template if you wanted to just print it out and not create your own. We have a new blog this month about kind of more of the science behind the connection between breath and regulation and the importance of integrating that practice to your classroom. And then we have our regular, wonderful inspiration to action webinar reflection guide that you can download and spend some time with to think about how you're going to synthesize your thoughts and use them to inform your practice moving forward. If you want to geek out with some more kind of scholarly journal articles about regulation and early childhood, there are some more links down here. You could totally go down a rabbit hole, but really helpful, valuable information as well.
And Christine, I'm going to interject because Melissa, who had a question at the beginning, what's the name of the 4 programs? So not just on the screen that we had the 4 grids, which was generally Conscious Discipline, Head Start, Center for Inclusion, and NCPMI, but also there were visuals in the first 2 slides. Those came from a collaboration between the Office of Head Start from the U.S. Administration of Children and Families, and then the UNC Center, and I forget the rest of the name, but it was a collaboration, and they created a whole suite of tools. So if you're looking for things and age specific, so there's like top tips for working with infants, and then with toddlers, and then with preschoolers. And there were resources for you as the educator, as the program administrator, as supporting families. So whatever link, that first one that says self-regulation and toxic stress series, then it was like the mother lode, and then all of the other resources are there, because we really want to support you in whatever curiosities came up for you today during our learning experience. Whatever direction you want to continue your learning, we want to be able to point you in that direction. So finally, we're like 3 minutes, but in those 3 minutes, do you have any questions that you can either put in the Q&A, put in the chat box, either about implementing your own place-based solution or about any of the strategies that we shared? I heard some conversation about different kind of gross motor things. So one point of either clarification or an opportunity is that not all gross motor or movement space needs to be large. It really just needs to be big enough for one child or one child and a teacher next to them. So creating the opportunity, or just a physical space, think of like a little bit bigger than a hula hoop, or one of those small little 2x3 mats that you might have. And you could actually put like masking tape in a certain area, and then like this is the physical floor space. But just having a space where at least one child could go and do some big body movements without being told, hey, you're going to bump into somebody, hey, be careful, hey, that piece of furniture is right next to you, like watch out. But if you have created a safe place just for one child to do gross motor, that can enhance all of the other amazing strategies that I saw being shared in the chat. So yes, having gross motor in a dedicated indoor play space, outdoor, turning your meeting rug into a gross motor when you can't go outside, all of those are amazing. And see if you might be able to have an active calming station or a movement station just for one person. So is there anything